There we are. So, hi, hello, good evening,
Hello.
good morning.
Good morning from me.
Yeah, what
good
time
morning.
is it for you?
It's 10:10 in the morning.
Oh, that's not
Beautiful,
too bad.
beautiful, sunny, warm day. Yeah.
Okay. And it's 6:10 here in Toronto, so it's a beautiful evening here.
Yeah, lovely.
And
Zero.
so
The temperature is 0.
Yeah, we got some snow today.
Oh wow. Okay.
a little bit.
Zero today.
0 Celsius.
Wow. Okay. I think it's going to be about 28 here today.
Okay. Yeah, you were on the upside, we're on the downside with the weather.
Exactly.
We have quite a bit of people joining and keep joining. They're still going to keep coming to discuss tonight with Neil. The topic is about not using Agile to get more things done. And I told Neil, this is a very chatty group. And he was very happy about that because he said, yeah, let's have a conversation and let's talk about it. So I'm Neil. I'm introducing you to our community. Neil, all the way from Australia. I actually never met Neil, only on Twitter. We're friends. My friend Monica there met Neil, but yeah, this was a chance for me to bring Neil here because we see you very active on our Agile community, and it's great to bring you and have a conversation for once.
Yeah, it's great.
Very cheap airplane ticket.
Exactly. It's funny because the time zones actually work, but it's funny how this whole COVID thing has actually increased the amount of sort of opening up we've done in our communities to internationally and what have you. So it's really great.
Exactly.
Yeah, had a few opportunities to attend some international things which I wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. So really happy to be here and talk this stuff through with you. It's just one of those things that bugs me in my work.
Tell us about it. Tell us about the bugging.
All right. Well, listen, I haven't prepared any deck or anything, so it's definitely wanted to have a conversation. I just did before my computer freaked out on me. I did just do a very quick sketch, which I'm just going to share with you. Just to frame the conversation.
Mm-hmm. You should be able to share.
Yep.
You have the default Mac screen.
Yeah, I haven't used this machine for a while, so it's an older machine. It's a bit slower, but at least it works because we haven't done the update on it. So I guess so. Hopefully, a lot of you have read. I wrote an article fairly recently called "Stop Using Agile to Get More Stuff Done." I think, so what I mean by that, I guess, is that I work with a lot of organisations, being a consultant, and a lot of organisations are sort of trying to use Agile as broadly as a means of improving their ways of working. But there seems to be a real sort of thing that just doesn't seem to go away, which is this idea that Agile is about making things faster or doing more. And I wanted to sort of look at that from a couple of angles. So I suppose the first angle is this kind of increased velocity kind of angle, where it's like the message is we want to get faster at what we're doing. And I suppose that the interesting thing for me there is, so as this graph shows, we're sort of trying to, we're being pushed to sort of deliver more features more quickly. So we're looking for this kind of constant increase in throughput or velocity. But what's interesting about that is that predictability, which is a huge, I guess, emphasis for businesses and their teams. Predictability goes down the more we try and actually get faster and increase our velocity. So, the purpose of throughput and velocity is to try and match our demand with our capacity and stabilize so that we can actually understand our capacity and be a bit more predictable in how we get things done, rather than we trying to constantly get more done. I suppose so. From a focus point of view, it seems curious to me, because predictability goes out the window if we're trying to increase speed all the time. We're kind of giving this mixed message where we're saying to people, we want you to be more accurate with your estimates, but we're also saying we want you to get faster as well. And the two things are kind of in conflict. And I suppose the second thing with that is that, look, obviously in some circumstances, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, there's nothing inherently wrong in trying to get more done, and I suppose get more efficient, if you like, within the bounds of our existing capacity and what we can get done, and removing waste and all those kind of things. But in the context of, particularly in the context of software product development, it's, generally speaking, more doesn't equal better. When we look at sort of software products, we kind of, we've all used those products where there's feature bloat, and actually the more features and the more changes that get made to a product, actually the worse it gets, and it actually sometimes reaches a tipping point where we move on to a different product because it's just lost the inherent simplicity that it had in the first place. So we're still in this kind of industrial mindset where we're trying to like churn out more widgets, more things, more, stories are our industrial widgets. We're trying to churn out more of them rather than look holistically at the products and services we're building and figuring out how to make them better for our customers. So we'll talk about the other side of the diagram later. Maybe, as a starting point, this idea of, this constant sort of desire to increase velocity. And actually, ironically, the Kanban folks sometimes contribute to this problem a little bit, in that obviously Kanban is a great way of helping us, improve our processes and understand our system of work and all those kind of things. But it often gets kind of integrated into software development teams with the idea of increasing throughput rather than trying to create a stable system where we can match our demand with our capacity. Because for me, where we want to actually limit work in progress in a software development context is that we want to create stability, and so that we can understand our capacity, which means that we can make sure that we only bring in the right amount of work, so we can do that work with good quality. And it also helps the pipeline. It helps us understand in terms of the pipeline how much we can get done by and when. From a forecasting point of view, it kind of helps us with that. That for me is why I'd want to limit work in progress in a product development system. But often it gets kind of bandied around as, well, you're going to get more throughput if you limit work in progress. And so we put this focus on efficiency and throughput rather than the quality outcome for our customer and the stability of our system. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. I've already spoken way more than I wanted to.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. On Kanban. So you were saying that Kanban in the software development context is sometimes used for throughput and that kind of thing. Yeah. But isn't that the history of Kanban? It's not an agile tool at all.
No.
It was developed in factories for basically supply flow management. They wanted to make sure that everything was just in time, and that the widgets arrived as was needed to manufacture. It was never in any way intended for agile, and it really can't be used that way at all.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point. Is that, if you look in the context of, for example, a factory like a car factory. So I've had the opportunity to visit the Toyota factory, or one of the Toyota factories here, and they do a fantastic tour where they really talk you through. They show you how the factory works in terms of how they build the cars, but also they really talk you through the whole Toyota production system, and the emphasis on continuous improvement, and the emphasis on like how they sort of make sure that each of the individual workstations has the right amount of time, to provide a quality outcome and all these kind of things. And so the interesting thing about that is that in the context of getting cars through a system, it makes sense that you want to optimize the amount of cars that you produce. It completely makes sense in that context, and it makes sense in terms of any context where you're creating something that you can then push out and it gets sold.
Yeah,
and that makes sense.
Like, for instance, DevOps tickets or sometimes bugs, this sort of thing. Exactly right.
So it's not that Kanban can't be useful in our product development context. It certainly can, but it's the emphasis that we put on things like limiting work in progress. As I mentioned, limiting work in progress will lead to greater throughput, all other things being equal. But we don't want to put the focus on that in product development. We want to put the focus on creating quality products for our customers. And yes, there is a speed element to it, but the speed element is about getting value to customers more rapidly, not getting more things to customers more rapidly.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And I think that's sort of like, there's a really big elephant in the room / massive term collision here, right? There's multiple types of efficiency. One of them is how efficient or wasteful is your process of producing something?
Yep.
But really, nobody cares about that. I'm like straight out. No one really cares about that. What they really care about is the efficiency of delivering value to the business, right?
Yep.
I can be 100% efficient and have absolutely zero waste in my process. But if I'm producing, cubes when what I need is beach balls, it doesn't really matter, right? Now, like when people, I think, say they want to get more done with Agile, they want to be more efficient with Agile. I think they're really talking about the latter. Is I want to stop working on things and wasting. Like I think some stats are up to 50% of the development time on things that just don't get used, right?
Yeah.
So there's a massive efficiency improvement and quote unquote getting more done from a customer perspective using an Agile process, right? And that's almost completely divorced from like limiting your work in progress or like anything of the back end efficiency of the Agile in itself.
Yeah, that's right, and that touches on the word efficiency. We often use. We just say the word efficiency, but actually there's different types of efficiency, as you mentioned. And, the type of efficiency that we're interested in, if we're talking about serving customers better, is flow efficiency. But the type of efficiency that we actually tend to try and optimize in the way that we manage our business and our projects is resource efficiency. We want everyone to be busy. We want everyone to have stuff that they're doing. And then the perception is that if everyone is busy and doing lots of stuff, then that's going to produce faster outcomes. But actually, it produces slower outcomes because we're looking at the wrong type of efficiency. The flow efficiency, where we're actually looking at how long does it take us to turn an idea into something useful for a customer, often called lead time, which again is a very useful manufacturing metric, but it's also very useful for us if we care about getting faster to market. So, for example, if I'm a big bank and all these smaller companies are disrupting me, and which is exactly what's happened, certainly in Australia. There's all these kind of micro banks that just focus on sort of one part of the customer journey and really do it well. So the big banks are going, right, we need to become more agile. And what they really mean is we need to be able to get stuff out faster so that we can sort of beat our competitors to market. But how that's getting translated within these big sort of agile transformations is actually we need to put focus on velocity and making sure that we're our processes are efficient and all these kind of things, and it's completely missing the missing the point.
Yeah, is a chance. Fernando has his hand up. Maybe give him a chance.
So hi. So one thing perhaps to keep in mind that it's limiting your WIP will not increase your throughput necessarily, right? What limiting your WIP will do is will stabilize your lead times. So once your WIP is constrained, your lead times become more predictable, right? what happens to your throughput? It can go up or down, but eventually will stabilize as well. But it doesn't necessarily lead to an increase of throughput. So when I see there about leaping width for stability, if by stability what you mean is predictable lead times, that will result in that. And
yes.
Also keep in mind that by predictable, really we shouldn't mix that with deterministic. So predictable lead time is still a probabilistic number that will go up and down, but it will just fluctuate within some sort of predictable range, right? So so that's something that I think is important to always keep in mind in this discussion, because it's not necessarily the case that a constraint in WIP will result in more throughput. And
so that's so that's an additional reason why we shouldn't focus on it.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. It's just almost this kind of blanket statement says, right, if we limit our work in progress, we're going to get an increased throughput.
Right.
But actually, like you said, what we actually need to do is start understanding our systems so that we can make them better. And that's the first step we want to do, is we want to understand how much demand is in our pipeline and how much capacity we have to service that demand and all those kind of things, and create that stability in the system. And to your point about predictability as well, like this is a classic as well, is that there is almost like a belief that the way that you become more predictable is to get better at estimating, rather than to create more predictability in your system by doing things like stabilizing, limiting work in progress, etc., etc. So I use the analogy sometimes when I'm talking about this from a forecasting point of view. The analogy of, I use the Shinkansen bullet train, which is, obviously super high speed, super reliable, and it's built on a high speed network. It's, it didn't come out of a desire to speed up an existing train. It actually said, let's look at the rail network and see how we can create a network that can support high speed trains. And then the bullet train comes along. And from a predictability point of view, I can show up on the platform at any time and know that there'll be another train along in 3 or 4 minutes. So I don't need to predict, I don't need to know when the next train is going to be. I can just show up and there will be another train. There's a predictable delivery of bullet trains. And actually that, from a software delivery point of view, what we want is a predictable delivery of quality, valuable products, not we want to get better at estimating how,
Why do we want a predictable, I don't even follow that actually, why predictable is the goal.
Sorry, well, when I say, so, yeah, that's a valid point. What I guess I mean is when the business is asking for us to be more predictable, what they think they're asking for is for us to get better at estimating, but what they're actually asking for is they want to be able to see that our software teams can produce value.
It's not predictable. In fact, those big banks, I know people that work them, they're incredibly predictable. They always fail.
Yeah. No, exactly. So I'm not necessarily saying that predictability is a good thing, but that's what the desire is for. Is they want to, when I speak to sort of executives in these companies, one of the majorly common gripes is they say, I don't see anything coming out of my development team. Like they seem really slow. I don't know what they're doing actually. So there's a few things going on there. And obviously part of this is empiricism, right? It's empirical process, in that we're not actually producing stuff that we can all look at and say, this is what we're producing. We still focus on the proxy kind of progress metrics like velocity. It's like we're showing execs velocity charts and saying when we're going to be done, rather than showing progress in terms of what we're actually producing and the value that's generating in the market. So that's part of the problem as well. So in the absence of seeing anything, they want to say, well, I want to see that the development team is producing stuff, and I want them to be able to tell me when something's going to happen, and it will happen. Because at the moment they tell me something's going to be delivered in March, and March comes along and it's like only half done, and this is frustrating. So there's this kind of massive disconnect with the way teams are being asked to work with what the actual desire is in terms of improving the business to be more agile, more responsive in the market, to be able to beat competitors, to be able to do better than competitors, to be able to produce really great products and services, all of these kind of things. The agile thing, the agile transformation thing doesn't translate into that behavior in management or in the delivery teams as well.
Yeah. There is an interesting dialogue going through Ben and Cheesy. Do you guys want to duel in front of everybody?
I don't know what that means.
I don't know. I have this conversation so we all can hear rather than read and then hear.
Oh, okay, great. Sure. So I've been around for 20 years in development, and one thing I've noticed is that when people or engineers are working on things where they don't have a good idea of why and what the value of doing that is, right? They tend to get really unhappy really, really fast, right? I mean, how many times have you said to yourself, this is completely useless, why am I working on this? Or like, I have no idea like whether anybody's even going to use this, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So everybody has this internal sense of this, is this really something I should be doing? And what I was saying is, like, when trying to choose, the question was, how do you choose the right thing to do? I'm like, go to the people who are asking for it to be done and ask them the question, please tell me how much this is valued. What's the value of this to the business, right? I'm saying, like, what's my expected ROI? Like, what is this going to cost me to implement, like, as the organization, right? And how much money, for instance, are we going to make off of this, right? So let's say I'm doing a feature, like, here's a classic example. Didn't work out entirely, but like, I come from a team called EchoSign, which is originally got pulled into Adobe as part of their contract signature. And my CEO said, we have to support contract redlining, absolutely have to do it, right? Now, the reason why he said this, and the reason why we took it on, is because he said, like, look, a lot of our customers want this. We have a new addressable market of contract editing. Like, we're going to increase our sales by 20%. Like, this is what this is worth. Now, he was wrong. Don't get me wrong. But, like, and this is where I think Cheesy's point comes in. But there was an actual dollar value he could stick upon this and say, like, I think this is going to be worth this much money, right? Now, when we chose to do that, we kicked a couple of other things off that would have had a different addressable value to the market, right? We were gambling, essentially. Like, business is a lot of gambling, right?
Yeah.
Especially in startup land. So when we took it, we're like, this is the highest ROI thing I could be doing right now, given the information and metrics that I accept, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying. Cheesy, do you wanna come up with your point?
Sure. What I was pushing back a little bit against in the discussion, the discussion was going about, making sure that you pick the right feature. And what Ben said was you should do that on potential business value. And that, to me, what my response to him was, that's full of speculation and biases, and that how do we know what that potential is? We don't know, and that's why so much software that's developed actually rarely gets used by end users. And so, often if you have this 60-year-old executive making decisions around what 20-somethings will use on their iPhone, that doesn't work, and the whole idea for me is really about not about assuming that you know what those right features are, because you'll mostly get it wrong. And we haven't gotten this far in the conversation yet, but for me, it's really about how can I run lots of really rapid experiments to validate those assumptions, to validate, is there really value there? And that's kind of the discussion that we were having.
Right, and I don't necessarily think you're wrong on that. I think actually the rapid discussions and experiments.
I don't think I'm wrong on that,
but right, are actually part of the data that you have.
Your big theories up front either. So
right, cool.
An interesting point that you are both. It's an interesting point that you are both making, because Ben, you are saying that there is a need for business to lead with an understanding of what to bring in market and how to thrive in market. And then Cheesy is saying, well, what if the business doesn't know? And business also needs to figure out things.
No, I'm actually not saying that at all. In fact, I'm actually more a bit in line with than cheesy than maybe immediately obvious. My theory is actually that every single person involved in the chain, from the executive down to the person writing the unit test, has to have an idea and have a general cohesive view that this is actually worth doing, right?
I would say I would modify that, Ben, and I would say it would be better for them to understand what outcome we're trying to achieve, you know, and to say that we don't have to say up front how we might achieve that, and let the team and the product folks and the customers ideate and iterate as rapidly as possible to ensure that we achieve that outcome the best way that we can. I think having the executives at the top say exactly what it should do, or even people above the team is a great way to fail.
So I want to bring Neil back. Neil, is also another conversation happening about reliability, which probably is the word that we're going around here, with predictability and desire to know and desire to, you know, predict. What do you think about reliability?
In the do we mean specifically?
Fernando, do you want
to? As in, are you a reliable partner, right? So if I make a promise to you, can you rely on the promise I've made to you, right? So when I think of predictability, that's the context. So we want to be predictable in that context, which is not the same to say this will take exactly 3 days, 5 hours, and 25 seconds.
Right? So that's kind of the point I was trying to make. Yeah, and particularly valid in a B2B kind of situation as well, in that we want to, like the way we grow trust with our partner is that we predictably deliver what we are expected to deliver. Now, when I say what we're expected to deliver, that's not quite what I mean. I mean the outcome that we are expected to deliver, not necessarily the thing that we're expected to deliver. So there's a predictability of, hey, you know, our partner are showing up time and time again with you know, something that is meeting our needs rather than the thing that we told them they need to create. So there's a predictability in that which then builds trust, and that's kind of what I meant in the business context. Is part of the problem, you know, is that we want to create this value chain, you know, up and down the company, but there's this big lack of trust upwards and downwards from the senior leaders and the development groups. See it time and time again, and at some point, you know, and obviously Agile was an attempt to try and bring business people and developers together. You know, they're supposed to work together daily according to the Agile manifesto. So at some point, we've got to try and figure out how to do that and create that trust. And for me, you know, if we think about practically how we can do that, then things like, you know, creating I call a value taxonomy, right? Where we've got to have this linkage between anything that a team is doing with some kind of value proposition. Now, ideally, you know, at a starting point, what often happens is that the value taxonomy that businesses create is kind of a bit ropey in that it's still someone at the top going, this is what we need to achieve. And then the team are doing what they're kind of being told. But at least it's a step forward in that we're now creating some kind of transparency in terms of why I'm doing this. Well, I'm doing this because Bob at the top is saying that this needs to be done. Okay, well, that's a step, maybe a step forward. But then, of course, the next step is that to actually take away that sort of that sort of deterministic idea of this is what we need to do, and instead say this is what we're trying to accomplish. And now let's start thinking about options for how we can accomplish that. And this is where, you know, we should be working together with the business people to figure that out. And then, you know, to Cheese's point, it's no good doing all that and then going away for 6 months and building something. You know, we actually need to we need to sort of minimize the work we need to do so that we can rapidly roll out capability and run experiments where we need to, so that we can actually learn what the right thing is to do as we go along. So this is another counter argument to the more and, you know, do more and do faster. You know, again, Agile Manifesto, it's about minimizing work. So if we minimize the work we're doing, it means we create focus on what we're doing, which means that we have and we have goals that are aligned with business goals and outcomes, which means we have a much better chance of actually doing the right thing and linking it back to what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that is now starting to collect all these conversations all together, right? It was not just about, okay, let's put WIP just for fun because we need to do, but creating that focus and forcing prioritization, right?
Yeah.
I cannot do 100.
Yeah.
If I'm doing 100 things, for sure I'm wasting.
Right. But it creates a filter, it creates a focus, and ironically, you know, the intention of Scrum, or like, you know, when I say Scrum, I'm talking more new product development Scrum, not the sort of bastardized version that we see today. But the idea is that we, by creating short time boxes where we put a focus on goals and a focus on value, we can only get you know, because we're working in a short time box, we actually have to go, well, there's a whole bunch of things we could do. Let's actually decide what's the most impactful thing we're going to do. It forces you, like you said, it forces you to prioritize and think about what we need to do next, which then sort of almost by default eliminates the rest. It sort of defers and rejects other things until they become the most valuable thing. Obviously, but again, the mechanism that Scrum is used as nowadays is a mechanism of micromanagement and of ceremony rather than of substance. It's, you know, it's agile theater, I call it. It's sticky notes and stand-ups and planning and retros that don't actually mean anything or result in any improvement. But you know what, the team are all doing, the team are doing their ceremonies, so therefore we're going to leave them alone for a while until we realize actually we're not getting any change in result. We're not getting nothing has really changed. So what's going on here? I thought Scrum and Agile was supposed to be the answer to why aren't we faster? I'm still not seeing any stuff churned out. You know, I'm still not seeing any product. And I would say probably 90% or even more of the Scrum teams that I work with don't actually produce anything at the end of a sprint. They've just chunked up their work into 2 week sprints, and then they're just rolling through and going, oh, in order to stay on track, we need to get deliver 53 points in this next sprint. If we don't deliver 53, then we'll have to add that on to our target in the next sprint to stay on track. It's completely the opposite of what the intent of Scrum was, which is about producing something useful and meaningful that we can actually deliver and then learn and get feedback from, and then so that we can actually understand more and more about what value means as we go along. So for me, the whole industry has just flipped around what Agile was supposed to be.
Neil, you quoted there the original paper. I think I heard you quote.
Yeah, new product development game. Yeah.
Right. So, but the whole point of that paper was that you were going to give the team autonomy, like real autonomy. Like the quote in the paper is, "We're going to open our purse strings but close our mouths." So you're dealing with teams that don't have anywhere near that kind of autonomy. They of course, there's all kinds of strings attached, and then as soon as there's all these strings attached and you don't trust anyone, then you're going to need these metrics, and then you're into velocity and these other things you're talking about.
Yeah, it's spot on. And this is, this is why all these principles exist, and in all these different frameworks, they all kind of share common values and principles. And of course, autonomy is needed. I mean, it's needed from a, if you think about it from a scalability of value perspective, you need teams that can actually autonomously deliver value from end to end, because otherwise, when you add people into your organization, you don't know that you're actually creating new, or you're creating a situation where new value can be created. You can only do that if you actually have teams that are value creation machines. They can actually own a problem and actually iterate on a problem and create value. So if all your teams can do that, then that's, that's obviously good for the business. And from the team's perspective, this comes back to, Dan Pink, autonomy, mastery, purpose. Knowledge workers are motivated by, doing great work and creating meaningful products and services for customers, and doing the right thing, and and learning new skills and all these kind of things. And if we continually just treat software development as a factory, and like a sausage factory, passing down requirements, we're just not getting any of the benefits of these sort of, what we now, so many studies have been done. We know scientifically what motivates people and what actually works in terms of value creation. We've got all these examples of these great companies that do this, and they actually publish their findings and they say this is how it's done, and we just ignore it as an industry and carry on with this kind of industrial complex. I also wanted to sort of maybe just jump onto the other bit of this puzzle as well, is that this, I suppose, this the dichotomy between sort of predictability and being more agile or being more responsive. So there's this expectation that an exec can kind of walk up to a developer and they can kind of ask them to do something, and because we're agile, that means that we can just respond to any new thing that comes along. And actually, what's actually happening is obviously this exec is just jumping ahead of this big queue of stuff. It's kind of like, I liken this to walking into a busy coffee shop and there's a queue of 20 people in there, and you just walk in and go, can you just make my coffee, please? It'll only take you a couple of minutes. Can you just do my coffee? And you just literally jump the queue. And of course, this then continues. Oh, shoot. I've just spilled smoothie all over me. I'll deal with that later.
Again, swear.
I'm too animated with my hands. This is the problem. So it's this kind of idea that agile means that we can just continually just respond to sort of new requests that come in, but actually, what we're not visualizing is this is enormous queue of stuff, and there's what I call a business commitment line, whereby everything above that line is all stuff that we've committed to delivering to the business at some point, which means that when we talk about true agility and the ability to actually respond to a customer or respond to changing circumstances in a meaningful way, we can't, because we become bogged down in the stuff that we're actually doing and the stuff that's in our queue. And what got me thinking about this is that I'm reading a book at the moment about algorithms, algorithms to live our life by, I think the book's called. And it talks about this idea that CPUs use called interrupt coalescing, where we expect that when we open up our laptop, we expect it to be instantly responsive. And if our mouse doesn't immediately respond or a keyboard doesn't immediately respond, we get frustrated. But the CPU obviously needs to do its work as well. It needs to do what it needs to do. So there's this balancing act of, if the CPU is just doing its work all the time, then it won't be responsive to us when we need it to be. Whereas, but if you go the other way and it's just purely it's so responsive that it's instant response, then the work it's doing takes longer. So there's this balancing act of we don't want to be so focused on the work we're doing that we can't actually be responsive, but we also don't want to be so responsive that we don't actually do anything. We don't create any work. And there's this balancing act in terms of the work. And then if you add to that all of the things we call interruptions in our day, like emails coming in, Slack messages, there's almost this expectation, and I really feel this as a consultant, there's this expectation that I'm kind of going to be really responsive. If someone sends me a message on Slack or an email, there's almost this expectation I'm going to get back to them very shortly. Now, in order for me to be able to do that on a constant basis, I have to be paying attention to the interruptions so that I can respond to them, which means I'm now context switching. I'm taking away my focus from my work. And as we know, bad things happen, and that actually slows things down and everything else. So I found this an interesting concept. I wanted to see people's thoughts on that. It's how we balance this sort of doing stuff with being responsive, because the two are kind of counteracting each other.
Declan is bringing a point about short term and long term. I don't know if it fits on all of this. Declan, do you want to?
Yeah, I think all I want to say is, you know, I look at things more on I usually work with the technical teams, and what I often see is that the decisions that were made a year or 2 years ago are actually what's limiting their ability to deliver value today. So in the push to go agile or be more lean, people will get immediate short-term benefits by cutting corners or not doing tests or whatever, but they pay the price in the longer term. And I find it's really difficult for organizations to make the right trade-offs on their planning horizons on one versus the other, because you can get like, we've all seen it where projects go super fast for the first 6 months or a year, 2-3 years down the road, it's like pulling teeth to get the next feature out. And it's not because the developers are, you know, not limiting WIP or anything like that. It's simply that they have accrued technical debt in service of delivering value today, right? And
that's another great point in the technical debt, right? The slowing down of future work by decisions we make today is absolutely, it's so common and it's a known thing. We know that if we don't put an immediate focus when we're building a product in an incremental and iterative way, we know that if we don't put a focus on building quality in and so continuously refactoring and what have you, so that we can make it very easy to add new capability and make changes. If we don't do that and we don't invest in that right from the beginning, then it doesn't take very long before suddenly that speed that we had at the beginning starts slowing down, and we grind to a halt because we're spending all of our time on bug fixes and changes where we don't have confidence in them. And then so then the release cycle slow down because we just don't have the confidence in what we're releasing. And it just gets harder to add new capabilities. So that's another massive element. And like you say, again, inexperienced scrum masters and coaches who are sort of they're ignoring all that and they're just going, right, I need to get this team to like limit their WIP. And actually you're going, but that's not where the gains are. The gains are going to be in actually adding quality into your process so that you avoid this problem happening again later on.
Neil, are they actually ignoring that, or are they paid to ignore that? I mean,
well,
a lot of them are under pressure to basically deliberately ignore that. I've been under that pressure myself before.
And ignore is probably the wrong word. More not address it. I don't think people are deliberately, I don't think there's deliberate ill intent with any of this. I think part of it would be just a lack of experience in knowing what I'm supposed to focus on as a coach.
But I've dealt with quite experienced people before where some of these things were just sacrificed deliberately.
Right. I think ill intent might be the wrong word there. I think that like it's a trade-off. They're like, well, I need this right now, and I am willing to make that trade-off. I've seen people make the conscious trade-off, right? And whether it's justifiable or not, I can't say. I wasn't in their area, but like it is sometimes intentional, and that's fine. I mean, that's reality, but it does incur a cost.
Because there's this sort of belief I've run up to that people think, the quality would come for free, but the quality is really another thing you have to judge the ROI on, just like anything else. The quality is a feature in itself, right? So like you could get a perfect architecture, and then some people will say, Yanni, you're never going to need that.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that's a whole another discussion around quality. But there's the I suppose the quality in terms of what customers loving what we produce and creating value, which is probably the meeting of customer needs is probably the real sort of measure of quality. Right, but then there's that internal measure of quality where it's like, well, if we don't do the right things as we're building stuff, which means it's going to slow us down later. And it's actually going to not just slow us down, but it's going to create problems. Because, for example, I see many teams that don't even have they don't even use unit tests. They don't even have like an automated regression suite. So they, how can they even confidently add anything new without knowing whether they're breaking 100 things, when they do it. So
right, but if they had added, just playing devil's advocate, if they had added those automated tests at the beginning of the project, they might not exist anymore, because that executive you were talking about before would have said, I don't see anything coming out of this team, and could have kiboshed the whole thing.
I want to stop here, if you don't mind, Neil. David, that's rarely true. I mean, that might be true over a couple of days, but over a longer than a couple of days, letting quality slack like that and not having that assurance actually causes you to go slower. Coming from a developer who works in this every single day, I've never seen a case where you can let quality slide and you can not have automated tests and expect to deliver faster.
No,
I can instantly give you a case. For instance, I'm always trying to convince people to go on DynamoDB over MySQL because the long-term benefits of DynamoDB are immense. You can scale up to any capacity and you don't have to worry about scale at all. And they're like, no, I don't really know that technology that well. It's longer to get on. It's going to take longer to write queries, which is true. I'm going to use the MySQL, even though I'll pay an enormous cost later, and a huge cost.
That's different from development, right? You're now choosing better tools, and that definitely helps the team with increasing of technology and better, more modern tools. We have artificial intelligence and machine learning now that can help teams. If we use those, of course, we're going to increase, but we're talking about development here, which is the quality of the code and the quality of the
product. It's the same thing. These are all investments, whether you invest in using DynamoDB or you invest in using integration tests. You have to analyze the ROI of all.
It doesn't work that way, David, whenever we're talking about code. Okay, it literally doesn't. And
I could give a comment here.
Sure that you could go rapidly. It's about making sure that you can continue to sustain a specific pace of development is what it comes down to. It's like what you're proposing is that I'm going to win the Formula One because I'm not going to take pit stops. I'm not going to address
it. Exactly. If you watch the movie Formula One, that's exactly some of the tactics people use.
What's that?
That is a thing that people use in Formula One. They try to reduce the number of pit stops. I'm sorry. But
yeah, so let's see you not never make a pit stop and let's see you not try to make a pit stop and win the Formula One. Yeah,
no, yeah. Try to make fewer pit stops, right? That is a strategy.
And that's part of adding tests and part of addressing technical debt is that if you don't, you will assuredly go slower. There's no way to go faster by eliminating that step.
But yeah, look, and I think regardless of where you sort of sit in this side of the debate, it definitely happens. Like, you know, whether there's definitely, you know, trade-offs and deliberate decisions are made to, you know, compromise on things, or, you know, in order to speed up delivery, and you know, we might even know the cost of that later down the line. Regardless of whether it should happen or not, it happens. So teams do slow down and get to a point where they just can't move fast. But there's an expectation, again, going back to the sort of velocity thing, there's an expectation that teams aren't just continuing to go fast, they're actually getting faster. And actually what's happening is they're going slower, and then this becomes this cycle of, again, this mistrust. It's like, you know, why are they slowing down? This agile thing isn't working for us. And it kind of, again, it's all sort of boiling down to this sort of misuse of agile. And actually, what I've done, what I actually do nowadays is that I've actually tried to deliberately remove agile, as in the word agile, from conversations that I have with people. And you know, I try and actually talk about what are you trying to accomplish. And of course, I'm always going to bring an agile, lean thinking lens to that. But when we actually boil down what we're trying to accomplish by saying, well, we want agile because we want to go faster and blah, 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 whatever it might be, all kinds of confusion happens and compromises happen. And people are sitting there going, this isn't agile. You get the team spend more time worrying about whether they're agile or not than what they're actually building and how well they're working together and these kind of things. It all becomes, the focus becomes on the process and the mechanics, you know. And this is not just Scrum. This isn't just Scrum. This is just Agile in general. There's such a focus on the mechanics of team. I've sat in teams planning meetings where I haven't even heard a discussion about what the thing is that they're building. Like, the planning is all like talking about like arbitrary things, like story point numbers, and Jira ticket numbers, which and they won't even talk about what the capability is that we're even bit. And at the end of the meeting, they'll say, "What what were your observations?" And I'll say, "My observation is I've got no clue what you're actually building." And I didn't actually see any planning happening. All I saw happen was you decide how many story points you're bringing into the sprint. That isn't planning. Planning is deciding what we're going to do to meet a goal. What are the things we need to do together to produce a useful thing for a customer, or to produce an experiment that is going to help us learn about what we need to produce for a customer. It's not just so it's yeah. Look, sorry, go.
Yeah, Declan is making a comment. Yesterday I worked on ticket 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, and today
I have a question. Actually, it looks like we are talking about one missing person, product owner. Because about roles and scope, can we really expect from developers that they can prioritize, or they can see business value in one function that he is going to create? And I think product owner should fill this gap between business, between trust and explanation to developers of value that should be delivered.
Well, that's certainly how Scrum handles it. And I would say that in your typical corporate nowadays, then you need a product owner, because in your typical corporate, teams are kind of are in this situation that I've sort of described, where there's a lot of chaos and a lot of ideas flying around, and it's like, well, we don't know what value is, so how do we know what to work on, because there's no one has described what the thing is we're trying to achieve. So the product owner at least is someone that should have that responsibility to go, well, I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to take all of the stuff that's flying around and I'm going to turn it into something that is, so we have a vision, and I can communicate with people, and I can tell them yes or no, or later, we have something to help us actually move forward in a meaningful way. But I would argue as well that I've also seen many effective teams that don't have product owners, but what they do have is a lot of autonomy and high caliber people who are motivated and work well together and have a clear goal, which is so important. If you don't have a clear goal, then there are many situations where teams have product owners, but they still don't have a clear goal. So people are still saying, what am I, why are we doing this? Yeah. So if the product owner isn't providing the vision and helping and also bringing the developers into the conversation about what is value and what are our ideas of how we can bring this to life. Yes, but it's definitely not a thing that's a must-have. It's a must-have in your typical corporate, probably. You at least need someone, and it could be a group of people, but you need a role that says, I'm going to take all of the million things that you think you want to do right now and turn it into, a meaningful product increment that the team can actually do and create value with, which is a really, really tough job in your typical corporate.
I have seen a note, there is a crisis of product ownership in Agile, because for every 10 certificates for Scrum Master, there is only 1 certificate for product owner or something like that.
So is it crisis certification?
Yeah, I mean, but it means actually project ownership, because everyone wants to do Agile, but still nobody knows what they're doing or which project should be, and nobody knows how to communicate with business. So maybe again, the small teams without product owner, was it kind of startup where people know what they want to build, or it was big like banking when we have business as a separate business and we hardly see these people even?
Well, I think the funny thing is there is always a product owner, whether you've named the product owner or not. There is always someone, and one thing that I do when I'm working in a team or in a company, I don't care who the product owner actually is. Part of what I want to find out is who is the real product owner. What I mean by that is who's actually making the calls in terms of what we prioritize, when we release, all those kind of things. Because often what happens is companies put a proxy in that role. So that person is just sort of working more at a micro level of the team in terms of prioritizing stories and what have you. but they don't actually have any ownership or authority in terms of budget and release cycles or defining value or prioritizing. So it's really, really important to understand who that person is, because one model for product ownership is the Steve Jobs model, right? It's like I'm gonna be the person who calls all the shots, right? You can agree with it or disagree with it, but it's definitely a valid model of product ownership. You have one person calling the shots. And then another model of product ownership is that you have a framework that helps you prioritize by business value. So things like cost of delay divided by duration is an example of a framework that helps you prioritize. And then another model is we're gonna collaborate as a product development team to figure out what the right thing to do is based on the outcome that we've been asked to deliver and the problem we're trying to solve. And that can, again, if the team has the right level of autonomy and authority to make decisions and to release things and to own that, that can work superbly well as well. So it's about finding what's the right fit, I suppose.
Neil, is the product owner calls all the shots even a real model? Because if I say to the product owner, the integration tests are at 75% code coverage, should we bump it up to 85? That's two different guys. The product owner in most cases is not going to be able to answer that question.
No. What a product owner should be doing there is understanding the risks and benefits involved in what you're describing.
He just doesn't. You need another guy if you want someone to understand that. The guy who, I've never seen one guy who can understand both.
No.
Well,
But what I'm saying is,
I think it's about how you tell them what the problem is. It's we're not at 75% integration test, and here's how it will cost you.
That's right.
Here's the cost of this.
Yeah, it's a conversation. So as a product owner, if I happen to be a technical person, but if I didn't know anything about how solutions are built and the technical side of it, and someone came to me and said, "Oh, we want to add some more integration tests," my question back to that is going to be, what's the impact in terms of schedule and what's the impact to what we're trying to accomplish right now, rather than trying to understand more about the technical details of it. Like, because actually I shouldn't need to know as a product owner. My focus should be on meeting customer needs and making sure that I'm meeting the business needs as well. I shouldn't necessarily need to know the technical details of that. So this is why I prefer a collaborative model, even if there's a product owner and we have that because there's someone who's got more of a focus on the customer and the product, and they have some subject matter expertise in the type of product we're building. But the model I like is we collaborate as a product development team. So we have constant conversations about this stuff. So as a product owner, I'm going to seek to understand a bit more about the developers and the engineers and what they're doing. And hopefully the engineers will understand more about the product side of what I'm doing. And we kind of collaborate on it, rather than it being this kind of, I'm just a sort of a conduit between the business and the team, and I'm just going to make calls one way or the other. It should, for me, my favorite way of doing things is to create autonomous collaborative product development teams who take ownership of a problem end to end and an outcome end to end, and can iterate on that in the way that they see fit, and they can show demonstrable progress and demonstrable what they can show, what they're building, and the progress towards that, which is the empirical part of it, which again is so needed and supposed to be the focus in Scrum, is that we're showing what we're doing.
I'm being mindful of time. We are a little bit over time, and probably an hour is going to be in 2 minutes. However, feel free. Some people are still staying, and chat is buzzing.
I do need to wrap up, so maybe 5 more minutes, and then I'll need to jump off. So,
I mean, if you have to go, thanks for joining. But if you want to stay, let's stay. Probably a few more minutes. There is a conversation going on. Cheese is making a point. Why do developers need to ask permission to do their job well when it comes to conversations?
They shouldn't have to.
Automation.
They shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
I came into a company one time, and they had a new developer. He'd been there for about 6 weeks, and we ran a retro just with the new people who had joined within the sort of last couple of months. And he said something that just has stayed with me. He said, if I'm asked to finish a feature by Friday, and I believe it's not possible because I need to, write some more tests, before I'm happy with the feature. What should I do? And the answer should be obvious, but unfortunately, the reality is that people are forced into cutting corners. It kind of just confuses me because, when we bring experts into our house, like for example, if I call a plumber to fix my plumbing, fix my blocked toilet or my blocked pipes or whatever it is, and the plumber shows up and says, okay, this is the problem, it's probably going to take me a couple of hours to do this. I don't say, well, can you have it done in 1 hour, please? And then the plumber goes, all right, and then basically does a poor job and makes compromises. Like I listen to what the expert says, and I say if it takes 2 hours to do a quality job and make sure the problem doesn't come back, then it takes 2 hours. So it's a weird dynamic where we hire super smart people, and then we not only tell them what to do, but almost kind of sometimes in a quite abusive way, where it's like, I want you to do this, and I want you to do it by Friday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things I've actually seen happen in Scrum a lot, with especially people who aren't really, I want to say, cottoned on to the ideas, the core concept behind it. Is it's very, I want to say, patronizing implementations of Scrum, where it's assumed that, I have to spoon feed everything to developer, and they're not these highly paid professionals. They're just people I have to babysit. And that gets me really irritated really quickly whenever I encounter teams like that, because this isn't an easy job, right?
No, and even worse when you bring in a freshly minted Scrum Master who's just done their 2-day certification, and they're telling me, how I should be working. And it's like, you're sitting there with 20 years experience, and you're being told by this. It's a really odd dynamic that's going on in our industry at the moment. And I try and call it out as best I can, and try and put the emphasis on the things that bring us together rather than the things that divide us. It's not just about the functional silos. It's just about this, and again, another sort of concept from Scrum. And again, it's so frustrating because there's so many great concepts in Scrum that if they're actually embraced would be important, would be fantastic. But the idea of activities over roles, the idea is that we just need to figure out as a group what we need to do and what we need to accomplish, rather than go, well, you do that, you do that, you do that, you do that.
One could be the other one.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone that has a chance to speak?
This guy.
Any chance you have like something you really want to say before we close for today? Just open.
Yeah, probably one more. Yeah, one more thing I can probably answer or talk about.
Sue, you have been chatting and helping a conversation going on chat. Is anything you want to voice?
I always have something to voice, but this has been fascinating. What I really feel, though, is that what Neil was saying was we're kind of abandoning what Agile was about. And what I consistently and always, preach is we have to start talking to people who are not us, who are, we have to start showing some empathy and understand that sometimes the people that are causing us all this trouble is because somebody came in and sold Agile wrong. And we have a role to play in helping to stamp out fake news.
Absolutely. It's that's exactly what I meant about, finding what the common ground between us rather than the things that divide us.
Yeah.
We get so bogged down with our specialist roles and our functions, and we sort of forget that it's a team game. We have to, no individual on our own in software development can produce something valuable. So we have to work together and cooperate and collaborate. The more that we can focus on doing that, the better outcomes we're gonna get to.
I really appreciate that you came in and talked to us today.
Oh well, no, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been been really awesome. Other than the fact that I've literally spilt a whole smoothie all over me that I'm now going to have to deal with. But that's my flailing arms. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the conversation here. You definitely sparked some good conversations, and people are buzzing on the chat, and they've been all talking. So I think everybody found value and felt they had something to bring in the conversation, which is the way we run our sessions. So thank you so much, and very happy you are here. And for everyone that is here, don't forget next week our next guest is Liz Ko, joining us from UK. And
Liz is awesome.
Yeah, so very excited about that. So good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and stay safe. Stay safe, everyone.
Yes.
Stay safe.
Yes, you too. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.